Making small batch maple syrup, simple.
Oh, hi there! Are you curious about maple sugaring in your own backyard?
What?
But how do you start? What do you do? I'm a professor of sapology with the Greater Canadian Shield Northern Ontario Institute of Maple Syrup.
And none of that's true.
I'm just a dude who 4 or 5 years ago figured out how to tap a couple of trees on his property, not even sure what species of maple they are. I couldn't find a lot of information out there. And while there are more videos today, they're more about the process versus how to get started.
What do you do?
I tried to figure out how to do it. I had a little handbook that showed me a few steps, and I've lived and learned.
He is not some sap master. However, if you're thinking of making maple syrup on your property someday, he's hoping that this video can help.
And I learned a few different steps on how to put together a real small batch maple sugaring operation that makes really delicious, healthy maple syrup on your own property with a very minimal investment in tools or supplies, a bunch of the stuff you probably already own, and you're like, where the heck do I start? Well, this is me. This is my point of view. This is how I do it. So here we go. So in all seriousness, but also not in all seriousness, who the heck am I? Well, my name's Jay. I have this channel, Simple Woods Life. After this video's done, feel free to look around. I'm a creative that worked in the city, and I moved out to the woods. I won't bore you with all the details, but I'm trying to figure out how to live off the land, live with the land. Not living off the land, but I'm living with it. About 5 years ago, I was on a back road and I passed this lovely, lovely maple tree, about this big. And this big maple had like all these buckets around it, and they were tapping the tree for maple sap. I got to thinking, like, man, the pioneers used to do that, you know? Like, how hard could it be? Here we are with all our bells and whistles.
Our bells and whistles.
And I don't know how to tap a maple tree or make maple syrup. Like, how tough could it be if someone did that with a fireplace and a pot? So I got myself the notion that I should figure it out. And I surmise that might be why you're watching this channel right now. This year we've had a weird winter, and I've put out all kinds of videos on sugaring, boiling our sap. And I've had quite a few people message me on Facebook, on Instagram, comments on TikTok, and saying, you know, first year doing it, or we've got 10 trees, I'm thinking of doing this, or I just started, or I finally was able to get out there and we've been watching you and it's been fun and we've learned all kinds of stuff. If I could turn back time, man, would I have loved to have somebody, you know, walk me through how the heck can I do this without a few $1,000s and, you know, 40 acres of maple wood.
It's too much. It's too much.
And you don't need to break the bank. You don't. You only need a couple trees. You probably have a lot of stuff already, or you can get it on the cheap. I hope it helps you. If nothing else, maybe it's interesting. Is this a maple tree? How about this guy?
That's a birch.
Cedar. Maple? How about this guy? I'm not trying to be facetious with you. Unless you're some kind of tree scientist,
That's a tree.
you're gonna have a tough time identifying maples. So step one, go out in the fall with your wife, your husband, your kids, your dog, or any number of those together, maybe a friend. Whatever your situation is, grab someone, go out in the woods. So in our case, our area with the maple trees is far from the house. So in the fall, I took the youngest out with a bunch of different types of flagging tape, and we went around and we looked up. This is the work of a young child who's marking trees, and that's awesome. But this is a maple tree, and the only way I would have ever known is by looking up and seeing the maples. And the only reason I suggest the fall is when it's green, it can be a little bit, I mean, you could do it in the summer or the spring. You knock yourself out. But, you know, it can get a little overwhelming when you're standing there looking up going, wait, is that this tree? Is that that tree? So we went in the fall. And it was a nice way to spend a fall day together, hanging out and checking it out. Oh, and these things here, because we're out in the middle of friggin' nowhere, I put up this brick line just so when my wife and the youngest come out, they don't get lost, because they've got a tendency of getting turned around, and it can get kind of turned around. So as long as you can follow the brick line, you're fine. And the deer duck underneath it or hop over it or whatever. Now, a couple things I'm gonna note. If you look things up, if you do the googly, they're gonna tell you don't tap anything less than a foot or 15 inches in diameter, right? So around the tree. This is, you know, this is a candidate, right? It's a nice big tree.
Ooh.
I don't feel like an old man, but I don't have 30 years to wait for all the trees on my property to get this big. Hi, this is a maple. This is Philip the maple. Now this is Larissa. Larissa the maple. I don't know. It's a maple, and the only reason I know that is because the youngest put flagging tape on it. I'm not tapping her. But look at how small... That sounded wrong. But look at how small she is, right? That's gonna take a long time to get up to that 15 inches in diameter. As opposed to Stefan here, not a whole lot bigger than whatever I called that tree. But I've tapped him, okay? Worst thing that's gonna happen, and I hope it doesn't, but he's not gonna make it. He's not gonna make it. And if he doesn't, we'll all have a moment of silence for Stefan. Shh. But I have so many other maples around here, 3 inches, 6 inches, 8 inches in diameter. I'm not gonna wait 20 years for this guy to get to the size he's supposed to be. And he produces, believe it or not. In fact, the majority of the maples on our property, of the 18 we have tapped, are undersized. And I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying we do.
Big whoop. Want to fight about it?
This guy over here, I just pulled a bucket out of him yesterday. So, you know, if you believe in them, then maybe they don't need to be as big and strong as they say they have to be for them to give you what you need. Believe in your trees, everybody. Believe in them. Anyway, long story short, identify your maples in the fall, and maybe don't feel so bad about tapping something that isn't necessarily the right size. Here's another tip. Work with what you've got. We've all driven down the side roads and we've seen the beautiful maple forests, and they've got all those vacuum lines running all around, you know, the big blue tubes, or there's buckets everywhere. Look at this, look what I'm working with. I've got primarily cedar, ash, birch, some pine, but then in and amongst them I have maple. Don't know what kind of maple. I don't know if they're black maple or sugar maple or red maple. They are maple. They have maple leaves. This is what I've got. So this is what I work with. Don't worry if you don't have a beautiful maple forest. Whatever you've got, put a little marking tape around it, and you tie it in a little knot. Any number of knots that you might want to tie it in, that's up to you. That's for you to decide. When the temperatures get just right, usually for us where we are, that's kind of, very late February, early March. This year, it was the 5th of February when it was a balmy, beautiful day. And you want your temperatures to be about -5 at night and about +5, +6 in the day. You don't want a lot of wind, you do want a lot of sunlight, and this is how we did it this year. I spent the last couple of days, the buckets, clean them all out with soap and water. Everything gets scrubbed down, gets sanitized with a light, very light mixture of bleach and lots of water. Rinsed a million times. So gear-wise, it couldn't be much simpler. Buckets, food grade buckets, bought them at a hardware store. But I mean, you could use a pail, you could use an old milk jug. Super awesome. Wicked tip there. You can use any kind of container as long as it's food grade. If you've got access to a dairy and you can get some big old ice cream containers, your local delicatessen or donut shop might have some food grade buckets. You could use a milk jug. Whatever you want to use, as long as it's food grade, you're looking at massive cost savings. A lid to keep out the rain and the snow and branches and crap like that. We got a drill, backup battery, because last year I ran into some trouble, and because of that I've got my grandfather's old drill. All right, should things give me some trouble, drill bit, and then we got our spiles. That's the thing that plugs into the tree, lets the sap come out, and that's the thing you hang your bucket on. Couldn't be much simpler. So one thing you'll find if you're sugaring is absolutely everybody's an expert. And also, everything kind of works. It's sort of like, you know, everybody thinks they've got the best dog, and they're right. That's a good looking tree there. 16 or 17 inches in diameter. And the rule of thumb is like 15 to 20, I think, inches, you can put a tap on. 21 to 27, you can put 2 taps on. Bigger than 27 inches around, you can go crazy. You put over 1,000 buckets on a tree if you wanted to. You know, they don't police it. You know, as long as you're doing this on your property or you have permission, you knock yourself out. We want to be kind of facing southern exposure, because we want this tree to get warm, right? We want nice cold nights, minus something, and then up above 0 during the day, and preferably with the sun heating everything up, which is going to draw the sap up, and we're going to have it come through our spile. That's this little fella here. All right, got a little holy bit there that goes into the tree, and we hang our bucket on it, and out drops the sap. We're going to drill in about 2 inches. I put a little bit of tape here on my drill and a little bit up. Right? You want to be about 3 feet up, give or take, but you don't want to be within 6 inches of last year's hole. Okay. I don't want to hammer it in too much. That's another thing. The bark that you get out of the tree. You see that? I got some snow on it here, but see, it's just a nice tree color. Smells like tree, right? If that came out kind of, you know, rotteny looking, punky looking, had a bit of an odor to it, you'd have to find another spot on the tree. But she's doing lovely here. There's not a heck of a lot to going and collecting sap from your sap pails, hanging on the trees. I bring out a couple of big buckets. They're 19 liters, about 5 gallons. I also have half buckets, but I don't always bring those. But I always bring 2 of the big buckets out, and I'll sort of sit them centrally. We'll take the pails off the trees and put them in the buckets. And you know what? That's it. That's really all it is. Pay attention, though, to your surroundings. If you've noticed that your taps are just flowing like gangbusters and it's been a couple of days and all your pails are full, great problem to have, by the way. You know, maybe you're going to start coming sooner. But, you know, also keep in mind what's going on with the weather. Has it been sunny? Has it been windy? Has it been cold? You know, all these things do play a part in how your sap's going to flow. So it's good to just pay attention, see what's what. Here's another tip. We're gonna have to do the old sniff test as we're pouring this out, because I hope it hasn't spoiled.
Is that the technical term?
That's called the sniff test. It's very scientific.
Sniff test. Passed. Smells fine.
The sniff test isn't real.
Oh, did you? Seriously? You made me smell.
I mean, if it smelled foul.
Well, it's clear.
Yeah, it's clear, and that's what we want. I do like to play tricks on her, but no, there's no such thing as a sniff test. However, yes, you will definitely smell really sour old maple sap. And what you're looking for when you're pouring it from your pails into your bucket is for something to be clear. It should just kind of look like water. Never mind the color of it in the bucket. Those buckets are not white, even though they pretend to be. But you do not want cloudy sap. That sap's going to be filled with bacteria. So, clear sap that smells like nothing. That's what you're after. Unless whatever you pull out today, you're gonna boil right now. You gotta keep it stored. This year has been strange. We should really still have snow on the ground. And normally what I do just behind this woodshed, I plow a big berm of snow and I shove our big buckets. I shove those into the snow, I pack snow all around them, I keep them filled with sap. We've got maybe 3 feet on either side, or about 2 feet thick. One of those buckets holds about 19 liters, about 5 gallons. So if I have 7 or 8 of them, I'll have a big, big boil, all day long boil. But this year we didn't. This year we were only getting a bucket at a time. And it was getting a little bit dicey on where we could store it because there was no snow on the ground. So we had to get to boiling right away. Before we get into boiling, which is your next logical step, there's a few things we got to consider. Your wood source. This is my wood shed. I built this summer before last, and we have so many dead standing on this property that whatever I just pull out of the woods, I buck, I split. Beginning of the season, this side was pretty full, and we only had 4 micro boils. So I did go through quite a bit of wood. Whatever your wood supply is, because if you're buying those pieces of wood from, like, you know, those little packets you can get at the grocery store or the Canadian Tire, zoinks, that's going to cost you some money. So think about your wood and think about your sap storage. I'm going to show you my evaporator next. Kind of want to build a little fire here because I feel like that'll be a nice way to relax. So turning maple sap into maple syrup just requires boiling. There's so much water in maple sap that the ratio is 40 to 1. 40 liters of sap will give you 1 liter of syrup, and you've got to boil all that moisture out of there. There's a number of ways you can do it. The professionals use maple arches, and these things can run from $800 up to $10,000, $20,000. So probably not something you're looking at, and it was certainly something I wasn't looking at. Pioneers used to do it in a big pot over a campfire, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. You know, it's going to take longer, but it can totally be done. I've seen people have an old wood stove outside and they've tossed pots on top of that. One thing you should never do, though, is do it in the house. It seems like it might be easy. It's an absolutely awful idea. The amount of moisture in there is definitely going to cause you to have mold growing here, there, and everywhere. Do what you want, but I would really, really say it's not a good idea. Any kind of block sort of square with grates on top that you could rest pots on or pans on, go for it. That's an awesome way to do it.
You can do it!
I went to the hardware store with my youngest and we grabbed a big old mess of cinder blocks and some various chimney pipes and elbow fittings and things of that nature, and made basically a U of cinder blocks. On top of them, I put a couple of decorative patio slabs just to keep the water and stuff from getting out in between. I have seen a few people since then fill their cinder blocks with sand, which I guess acts as a bit of an insulation, which is great. The cinder blocks lasted longer than I thought they would. I thought they were going to shatter. But before I could even start, I had to shovel out, and then I set a massive fire, and I had that going nearly the entire day just to try and get down to flat earth. I laid out a bunch of pea stone, gravel, whatever, to kind of get myself somewhat level, and I did, and then that's where I built my cinder block maple arch. It was just enough room for my pans. The pans, I bought those on Amazon, and they're just your regular stainless buffet pans. Nothing special, but they've lasted me for years, and they've been subjected to some serious temperature, and they're only a little bit of warping. But that was the arch number 1. This is the Mark II, I'll call it, barrel evaporator. The arch is literally a barrel. I bought this barrel off of Facebook Marketplace. In fact, I got 2 of them. And the reason I got 2 of them is I knew once I cut the middle part out to hold the pans, I would want to have a lid so this didn't fill up with rain and snow. I measured my pans, I cut that out. There's a million places you can find kits to convert barrels to stoves. Again, got mine on Amazon. Wasn't a lot of videos when I did this, so when I did it, I did my best to get this door as centered as possible, but a little bit lower. In hindsight, this bung here would serve a lot better to be down below. You can open it up to get extra airflow. I've seen people hook it up to a small fan and a tube to work kind of like a blacksmith's bellows, you know, just to really draw through. So this is the Mark II sap evaporator, and we have spent hours upon hours upon hours back here with tunes and giggles just watching the sap go down. The only tools you really need for this, a pan, 2 pans is ideal, some kind of a sieve. We just use one of those mesh wire strainers to get like the foam out or any twigs or any bugs or stuff that go into it, and a ladle. So you can use your front pan as sort of a warmer, and your back pan is your main sap pan, syrup pan, boiler pan, and you'll ladle the front into the back because you always want to keep a boil going. Boiling takes a long time, so clear the day. I've read all kinds of different stories, and there was one story I came across which was quite cute. It was either a doctor or a dentist, I'm not sure, operated as they did during that time out of their home. A part of their home was the office. I guess the doctor had his maple evaporator out in the back, and he'd get it going, but would do whatever procedure they had to do, and every 30 minutes would run outside and check. And it makes me giggle. I always thought that was cute. So you could set up your evaporator if you had a bit of an understanding and just come back to it every now and then to check on it. But, I mean, you're not dealing with hundreds and hundreds of liters or gallons of sap, so I wouldn't suggest you do that. Just stand around. I rarely sit down. I'm constantly skimming or ladling from one side to another. It's always an enjoyable time. And it's just beautiful to be outside. February, March, like what the heck else are you gonna do? You know those days where you take your jacket off and then you go, oh jeez, and you put your jacket back on? Like that's usually what you're talking about, so it's nice. Get your fire going however you want to get your fire going. You want a nice big fire. Put those pans on. Don't leave them on too long before you get your sap in there because they will scorch and they will burn. Nobody wants that. You'll see we have a little bit of ice in here. That's a whole other conversation that is here nor there for the purposes of this video, but you're going to have people telling you if there's any ice to throw it out. You are small batch sugaring. Look at this. Couple of jokers just joking around. They're not concerned whether or not if they're there for 3 hours or 4 hours. They're just having a good time. So you just let it boil, and every now and then you skim the froth that comes up from the sap that's bubbling away, and every now and then you ladle more sap from the warming pan into the back pan. And I don't have fire bricks, so I seem to be constantly feeding this bad boy. But it's just a lovely, lovely way to spend the day. Look at that boil. Just a rolling boil of goodness. And there's the old skimmy basket. The sieve, the strainer, whatever you want to call it. And there's me ladling. And that's the process. And you can see the difference in the color of the back pan, which is really turning into syrup, and the front pan, which is just warm sap. And this can go on and on and on. See, here's the thing. There's some sap boilers I watch out there, and I mean, here's the one lovely thing about small batch sugaring. There are things that do not bother me, that bother people who do this for reals. Don't have fire bricks, that's strike one. Ice in the sap, gaps and holes on the evaporator that are letting heat escape, strike three. Oh, I'm not using an RO system, strike four. But all of those things are, you know, what's the end result? I might have to boil longer. And like, man, sometimes that's the best part of your week. I don't mind boiling longer. And if I was doing something with like 100 trees, 200 trees, and dealing with 500 to 1,000 liters of sap, oh, I'd be looking for a million ways to cut my time down.
All right, partner. Keep on
Boiling.
baby. You know what time it is.
All right, man. You're going to keep boiling and boiling and adding from the front pan to the back pan, and eventually you're going to have the back pan looking like this, all golden and lovely. Get a candy thermometer. They're not expensive. And keep an eye on that. Sap turns into syrup at 219 degrees, but it'll hover for a long time at 217, 218. Now, this is not enough sap to make anything worthwhile of maple syrup, so we pause our boils. We'll boil all day, get to about here, and we'll take this off the heat, run it through our strainer again, and put it into a pot. And we'll put that pot on the garage floor where it's nice and cool. Put the lid onto it. And then tomorrow or the next day, we'll start all over again with new sap. At the end of that new sap, we'll amalgamate that pot from the garage into the new sap and keep going. Because you're doing a small batch setup here, you're not going to have 50, 60, 70 liters to boil at any given time. Probably. Come on, man, you said you had like 2 or 3 trees. Happens quick. This is not the scummy foam happening. This is the final boil foam, so I'm going to take it off. Perfect world, we would jump right into finishing right now, but don't have the time. So, we'll treat this as a pause. Oh. Got my my UV glove wet with hot syrup. We're unfortunately in one of those situations where it isn't really ready to come off, but it's also ready to come off. And things will crawl along with maple sap forever and a day. And then all of a sudden they will come at you like machine gun fire. That was sitting between 217, 218. And without even knowing it, that thing would start to froth, boil, and want to go into the finishing stages super quick. And the last thing I want to do is overboil it. That pot is to the top. I don't even know how I'm going to get it back to the lodge. I could put it back in the pan, boil it down some more, but like I say, it's going to turn into syrup way too quick. I could overdo it. I don't have control on this. So the next step will be another pot, thermometer, turkey fryer, and we'll boil that down even more. And then from there, we'll finish it on the stove where we can control the heat absolutely perfectly. And we'll have another thermometer, and then we'll introduce our hydrometer to figure out where our sugar levels are at. And then when they hit that spot, Robert is one of your parents' brothers.